Hare Krishna. Welcome to the third session on the art and heart of spirituality. We're discussing how, for advanced practitioners of Bhakti Yoga, offering their heart to the Lord and experiencing deep connection with Krishna is very natural. And our endeavor through this seminar is to learn steps or is to learn ways by which we could also switch on the heart button in our bhakti. Unfortunately, for many of us, the head button is always on. We are constantly analyzing and thinking rather than living in the space of offering heartfelt emotions to Krishna. So, we have discussed basically so far three principles through the example of the wives of the Brahmana from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Three principles that can help us experience connection with the Lord during our Bhakti Yoga practices. And these three principles are hearing about the Lord consistently, secondly, rendering services, which is what we discussed yesterday and day before. And then we also discussed the third principle, which is we need to begin to invest our emotions in Krishna. So for this, we discussed the pastime of Satsarup Maharaj when a devotee asked him that how can we offer our hearts to Krishna and how can we offer prayers if we don't feel like? So Maharaj suggested we need to go one step back and offer a prayer to Krishna that I'm unable to offer a prayer. And if we can't offer such a prayer, then again we go one step backwards and offer a prayer that we can't offer a prayer to offer a prayer to Krishna. Somehow we have to connect to Krishna and offer our emotions. Although this is the difficult part because we are habituated to offer emotions to material things or material people. But how do we offer emotions to Krishna whose presence we are unable to perceive directly in our lives? It may be easier for me to offer my emotions to a human being or even an animal in this world than the Lord, the Supreme Lord, who lives in a transcendental world. So how do we do that? So to understand that, we'll continue with the pastime, and we will see how we can enter into the heart of Bhakti. So in this pastime, the coward boyfriends of Krishna went to the Brahmanas asking for food, and they were neglected. And then the boys were told by Krishna, now you please go to the wives of the Brahmanas. And when they went to these ladies who were simple hearted, these ladies immediately offered whatever they had. They collected that in the pots. They had cooked a huge feast for the yajna, and they ran towards Krishna like rivers rush towards the ocean. And their husbands, brothers, children, relatives tried to stop them, but they were unstoppable. They came rushing to Krishna and they offered everything they had to Lord Krishna and Balram. So when they came in front of Krishna in the forest, what did they see? Who was standing there? Krishna was standing there with the lotus flower in his left hand. He was twirling it, and his right hand was on the arm, on the shoulders. His right arm was on the shoulder of another friend of his. And Krishna was standing in his threefold bending form, and he looked stunningly beautiful. Shukdev Goswami describes that the sight which was beheld by the women, Shyamam Hiranya Vanamalya Barha Dhatu Pravalanattaveshamanumgratamse Vinyastahasthaitareణ dhunanamabjam Karunotpalalakakapolamukhabjahasam. So, what was the scene? So, when they appeared there with all the prasadams for Krishna, they saw Krishna is Shamam. Krishna is in the complexion of a dark monsoon cloud. And this complexion of Krishna was contrasting beautifully with the cloth that he was wearing, which was Hiranya, which was golden yellow color. So Krishna's dark monsoon cloud complexion and yellow garments was creating an exceedingly beautiful sight. And to top all of this, he had a beautiful forest flower. Shamam Hiranya Paridim Vanamalya Bharha. He had a peacock feather, and his face and his body was decorated with Dhatu Pravala Nataveshamano Vratamse. The Dhatu, the minerals of Vrindavan, the dust particles of Sri Vrindavan Dham were smeared on his body, and they were creating a very special effect of beauty in Krishna. And Natavesham Anubratam say he was standing like an expert actor. He was standing in a very dramatic pose. Krishna is not standing static. He is not stiff. He is gracious. And what was he doing? He was not simply standing like this. He was twirling. Vinyasta hasta itarena dhunanam abjam. Abjam means a lotus flower. He was twirling a lotus flower beautifully. Karnot Palalakakapola Mukhabjahasam. He had white lily flowers stuck on his ears, and his forehead was shining, and Mukhabjahasam, his face was pleasing. He was smiling. So this is the sight which the women from Vrindavan were able to see when they saw Krishna. Now, this is also a very good meditation for those who want to get attached to Krishna. We can also meditate on this form of Krishna. Krishna standing with his yellow garments, the peacock feather, this pleasing smile. The Srimad Bhagavatam gives many verses describing how we could meditate on the Lord's form. Ekaikashungani dhyanu bhavaye padadiyavad hasitam gadabrita jitam jitam sthanamapoya dharaye param param shuddhyati dhiryata yatha. Ekai kashongani, one by one, step by step. Let us meditate on the limbs of Krishna. This is a recommendation given by Srila Sukadeva Goswami in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that we can fix our mind on Krishna's transcendental limbs, starting from Pada Diyavad Hasitam Gadabrita. Starting from his lotus feet, we can go up to his pleasing smile. And what will happen? Jitam Jitam Sthanamapoya Dhare. As we rise in our meditation from Krishna's lotus feet to his face, we will see that we will also be conquering over our lower selves. Param Param Shuddhyati Dhiryatayata. So as we meditate on Krishna's limbs and as we move progressively upward on his transcendental body, Param Param Shuddhyati, we will also accordingly experience purification of our consciousness as we are meditating on Yatha Yatha. As we meditate on Krishna's form, we will also experience purification of our consciousness. So this is the way we become Krishna conscious. And Shukdev Goswami never loses an opportunity to describe Krishna's beauty in great detail. Therefore, in the very first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when the sages are assembled there, they are greeting Sutta Goswami and they're begging him to speak more of Srimad Bhagavatam because they're really excited to hear about Krishna. So at that time also, they tell Sutta Goswami that we had assembled here to perform 1,000-year sacrifice, and we've been performing so many sacrifices, so much of fire yajna. And what is the result of all these yajna that we are performing? Karman asmin anashvase dhuma dhumamritam bhavan apayati govinda pada padma savam madhu. Karman asmin anashvase. We have been performing so many sacrifices. Even these brahmanas in this pastime are doing all these yajnas. So the result of this yajna is what? Dhuma dhumamritam bhavan. Only more and more smoke. And this smoke is, of course, it is very auspicious what these sages were doing, but out of humility they are saying that the fire yajna that we are performing is only producing smoke and more smoke. But you have come, O great sage, apayati Govinda, you are giving us Govinda, you are giving us Krishna, and Pada Padma Savam Madhu, the nectar of Krishna's lotus feet. Krishna's katha, Krishna katha is like honey, and that honey is emanating from the lotus feet, and we are able to meditate on Krishna's transcendental, beautiful lotus feet and his form. So this is the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna is glorified in choice poetry, and here the women have come with prasadam, and they are giving this prasad to Krishna, and they see Krishna twirling a lotus flower. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur beautifully paraphrases a conversation between the Brahmana Patnis and Krishna. Krishna tells them that, I'm twirling this lotus flower because my heart is like a lotus flower, and my heart is actually going through a lot of churning of emotions as I'm spending time with you, as I'm seeing your beautiful form. And then Krishna says, actually, this lotus flower which I have. So Krishna continues to explain. He says, not only my heart is like a lotus flower, your hearts are also like a lotus flower. And what I am doing through this pastime is I'm twirling this lotus flower. This is to indicate that I'm actually holding your heart and I'm twirling it. I'm churning your heart with emotions for me. This is bhakti. This is spirituality. So when we practice spiritual life, Krishna, he actually churns our heart with emotions. You'll see devotees going through intense situations. You'll see devotees offering intense prayers to Krishna. So this is all compared to Krishna twirling the lotus flower, because there are refined, evolved emotions growing in the heart of a devotee. In fact, one woman, one of the Brahmana Patnis was running towards Krishna to offer food. She was stopped by her relatives, and she was feeling such intense separation from Krishna that she actually gave up her body. She died. She gave up her body and she went back to the spiritual world. So this is one of the effects of practicing bhakti, that the heart becomes rich with emotions, feelings. We find a similar description in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where when the four Kumaras entered the Vaikuntha abode of Lord Vishnu, they were stopped at the gate by the gatekeepers Jay and Vijay. So the four Kumaras, when they were entering, they were, up to that point of time, they were absorbed in Krishna's meditation on Krishna's impersonal form. But when they entered the Vaikuntha, they smelled the fragrance of Krishna's lotus feet dust, which was carried, and there is a tulsi decorating Krishna's Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. So the fragrance of the tulsi was carried in the air, through the air, and that entered the nostrils of the four Kumaras, and it created a churning of emotions in their heart. And from impersonalists, they became devotees of Krishna. तस्यारविन्दनयनस्य पदारविन्द किञ्जल्कमिश्रतुलसी मकरन्दवायु अन्तर्गतस्य विवरेण चकार तेषां संक्षोभमक्षरजुषाम् अपि चित्तः तन्वो तस्यारविन्दनयनस्य पदारविन्द. So meditating on Lord Vishnu's transcendental form, they entered, but Kinjalka Mishra Tulasi, the mixture of Tulasi mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of Lord, Makaranda Vayu, the air, the breeze carried the fragrance of Krishna's lotus feet dust and the Tulsi, and that entered the nostrils. Antargatasva vivarena chakara tesham sanshobham. It agitated the minds of the four Kumaras, and they were transcendently agitated, which means in Krishna consciousness, when one gets connected to Krishna, one goes through an emotional, spiritually uplifting experience. So this is a very, very important instruction in this pastime, that as we are practicing Krishna consciousness, as we are chanting, as we are improving and increasing our commitments in bhakti over the past so many years, we need to ask a question to ourselves: Are we? Is our emotional relationship with Krishna active? Are we offering our hearts to Krishna? Are we connecting to Krishna at the emotional level, or is it simply rituals? Okay, I understand. We may not experience love. We may not experience affection 24/7. That's natural. But do we at least sometimes experience deep affection? Do we actually offer our heartfelt prayers to Krishna? Do we offer a prayer with feeling? Like, um, in a relationship, let's say there is the husband and the wife. So they are working for the family. Now they are taking care of each other. They're taking care of the family. They have love for each other, and they may be busy the whole day, but they do spend time, exclusive time, to connect to each other. Now they don't spend time in the sense they don't sit and say, okay, I love you, I love you. I want to feel love. No, love is there in the background, and they serve the family. They serve each other. But although there is love which is motivating them to serve, if they are disconnected from each other, if they actually feel lost, they pause and they connect. So this connection with each other is very important in relationship. Similarly, in our relationship with Krishna, it's all right that we are serving Krishna. We are doing projects, we are doing book distribution, we are doing life membership schemes, we are generating funds, we are doing construction, we are preaching, we are doing so many projects. Great, which is for Krishna. But if we are getting disconnected, in the sense, if our life is getting entangled with material energy more, that means we are losing connection with Krishna. So at such a time, do we have the wherewithal to stop, to pause, and say, hey, wait, Krishna, I'm getting disconnected. I need to connect to you. Krishna, this is for you. Krishna, are you there? Hmm? So, so a devotee, a sadhaka, a spiritual practitioner, time and again takes inventory of his consciousness. Remember, Srila Prabhupada established International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It is our consciousness that needs to be offered to Krishna. It is our consciousness that has to be purified. It is our consciousness that has to become spiritualized. And what is consciousness? Srila Prabhupada, in many places, in many of his lectures, he defines, when he says consciousness, he means a conglomeration or a combination of three things: mind plus intelligence plus ego. These three together, Srila Prabhupada said, is consciousness. Right now, our consciousness is contaminated. Our mind, intelligence, and ego is polluted. But when we remember Krishna, when we chant Krishna's holy name, when we hear about Krishna, so this consciousness, this composition of mind, intelligence, ego, this gets purified. Just like an iron which is put in fire becomes fiery. Similarly, when consciousness is connected to Krishna, then consciousness becomes Krishnaized. So, therefore, when we are rendering various services, we need to pause, we need to connect to Krishna. Oma pavitro pavitro va sarvavastam gato pivah yasmaret pundarikaksham sabhaya bhayantarah shuchi. Whether we are purified or unpurified, apavitra pavitrova sarvavastam, in all time, place, and circumstances. Yes, Mare, if we can somehow connect and remember Pundarikaksham, the lotus-eyed Krishna, Sabhaya Bhayantara Shuchi, we become purified and cleansed inside, within and without. Therefore, the key is this connection. So, this emotional churning, like yesterday I gave the example of this devotee who was very disturbed and angry with Krishna, and his spiritual master told him that he was making advancement because he was offering his emotions to Krishna. He was going to Krishna and telling Krishna that, Krishna, I'm suffering. Krishna, are you there? Krishna, please help me. So this is the key. Our relationship Krishna is not contingent upon Krishna satisfying our desires. Whether Krishna satisfies our desires or not, what is more important is we go to Krishna. Sometimes people accuse us, oh, you are Hare Krishna devotees. You are supposed to be lovers of God, but you go to God. When somebody is sick, you are saying, oh God, oh Krishna, please cure this devotee. When you have a job problem, you are praying to Krishna for a better job. When you want to travel from one place to another place, you are saying, Krishna, please let me go there safely. So you are as materialistic people because you are also approaching Krishna for material desires. No, we need to clarify. When we approach Krishna apparently for our material needs, that approaching Krishna is not in the mood of a businessman. It's not that, oh Krishna, you better fulfill this 1, 2, 3, 4 desires. Only then I will continue my relationship. No. We approach Krishna, and even if Krishna doesn't fulfill those desires, we continue to have a loving relationship with Krishna. So our entire goal of going to Krishna for our material things is not because we want those things, but we want to come closer to the Lord. See, just like an employee negotiates with an employer, and a child asking his parent. There is a big difference between the two. When an employee is asking something from his boss, the relationship is contingent upon his desires being fulfilled. But when a child is asking from his parent, whether the parent gives that thing to the child or not, the relationship remains intact. Similarly, as devotees, we approach Krishna. We offer our emotions to Krishna. For everything we ask Krishna. I know so many devotees, not only food they offer to Krishna before eating, even if they buy a pen, before writing the pen, they will offer in the altar of their house. Krishna, this is what I have purchased. They buy a new pair of clothes, they'll offer those clothes in the altar. Krishna, please accept this. I accept, and then I take this as your prasad. So you may think, but why offer a pen and a cloth? No, the whole idea is we want to remember Krishna. Yes, Maret Pundarika Akshamsa Bhaya Bhayantara Suchi, our consciousness, mind, intelligence, ego gets purified when we offer our heart, our consciousness to Krishna. I know devotees who even before taking their medicines, they offer to Krishna. Krishna, I'm taking this medicine. Please let me take this as your prasad. Because you don't give medicines to Krishna. Krishna is not sick. But Krishna is offered this by devotees out of love because they somehow want an excuse to remember Krishna. They want to connect to Krishna. So this is what is this is what is happening in the lives of these Brahmana Patnis. This is what happened to the 4 Kumaras. They went through an emotional upheaval, spiritually uplifting experience where there was churning of emotions. As devotees also, when we come new in Krishna consciousness, we get excited by the chanting, by the prasadam, by the programs. But this is simply the beginning of bhakti. Bhakti actually grows when we take it to the next level, when there is there is a struggle, and in that struggle we offer our heart. Like right now, many of us are at the stage of anartha nivritti, a stage of cleansing of the material desires from the heart. It is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the example to Rupa Goswami at Prayag when they had a meeting for 10 days. But Chaitanya said, devotional service, spiritual practices, this is like an ocean, huge ocean which has no depth, and which is so deep that it has no bottom. And also it is so wide and so expansive that it has no shores. So imagine an ocean which is so huge that it has no shores, and it is so deep that it has no bottom. So Lord Chaitanya said, Bhakti is such an ocean. And if there is one drop from this ocean is taken, one drop of water from this ocean is taken, that one drop is sufficient to drown the entire world in loving ecstasy of Krishna consciousness. So this is the power, this is the nectar of bhakti. Now, to experience that ecstasy, however, we can't be at the shores of the ocean. Now, we come to Hare Krishna movement, we hear about Krishna, we attend Bhagavad Gita courses. So it's like, we're entering the ocean. But if you see in the ocean, there are huge waves which are tossing about, which hit us. But what an expert fisherman does, who has a boat, he tolerates these hard hitting waves, he somehow takes his boat deep into the ocean, and it is in the deep ocean that he puts his net and collects the fishes. Similarly, when we enter the ocean of Krishna consciousness, at the shores there is struggle. It's a struggle to take the boat of our bhakti deep into the ocean. We'll keep facing setbacks, challenges. But once we can take our boat deep into the ocean, that's where we can collect the fishes of realizations and experiences of connection with Krishna. So these examples, these pastimes from the Srimad Bhagavatam are inspiring us, are encouraging us to not stay stuck at the shores. So because we have to go through struggle, because we struggle in our material life, right? We struggle in our job, in our relationships, in our family. So then when we come to Hare Krishna and we hear that in spiritual life also there is struggle, we get discouraged because we are tired of struggle. We want bliss. We want ecstasy. Why this struggle? No, Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada, or Parampara is assuring us that this struggle is natural because the struggle is at the shores of the ocean. If we can, if we can sustain and if we can cross through this, then we enter the stages of Nishta, Ruti, Asakti, Bhava. We enter higher stages of bhakti. But we have to go through this struggle simply, just like we need to go through this struggle so that we can come closer to Krishna, so that we can offer our hearts to Krishna. Because this struggle per se, that is the rule of this world, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that we're all eternal, we're all supposed to be experiencing deep union with the Lord. Mamevamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manah sashtanendriyani prakriti sthani karshati. Krishna says that struggle, karshati, is the name of the game of this material world. We are constantly struggling, and this struggle causes suffering. When we come to spiritual life, however, there is a purification that is happening because of this struggle. So when we struggle in our spiritual practices, that struggle is healthy. It purifies our consciousness. It purifies our mind, intelligence, ego. It removes the dirt from the consciousness, from the mirror of our heart. But having said that, we also need to clarify that we can't be struggling 24 hours a day, because this struggle which we go through in life, especially in our spiritual practices, is born out of a sense of duty, a sense of obligation. We we want to come closer to Krishna, and in that effort we are struggling to stay awake. Like for example, we are hearing the class and we feel sleepy, so we struggle to stay awake. When we are chanting, we are distracted. We struggle, we fight, we make a choice. Yesterday we were discussing about choice at the service, at the second choice that we need to make to experience emotions for Krishna. And these choices always mean a struggle. And then also, in our relationships, in our chanting, anything we do, like tolerating other devotees' idiosyncrasies, is also a struggle. So we constantly go through struggle. But within this struggle, we also need to look for a calm center. We need to look for a space of satisfaction where there is no struggle. And in that space of satisfaction, we need to spend some time there. And that is what is technically called as a home state. It is a state where we experience deep contentment. For some, now, for many, their chanting of 16 rounds is not their home state. Fine. It's not a space where they are actually deeply satisfied. It's a struggle. Every day they are just looking at the counter beats and trying to finish off their 16 rounds. So it's a struggle. Fine. Then what do you do after your job? Then you have a meetings with devotees and you're doing some projects. So there is a struggle there. Then you have some negotiations. There is a struggle there. Then you sit to hear the class and you feel sleepy and you're struggling there. So everywhere, if you're struggling the whole day, it can have a debilitating effect on your body and mind, although the soul is getting nourished by spiritual struggles. But body mind composition is a reality. So we need to take care of it. Therefore, while practicing bhakti, we also need to look for those aspects of spiritual life where there is no struggle. And that is like our home state. That's a state where we simply get nourished by Krishna happily and we experience contentment. Now, when we are chanting Hare Krishna, it is, for many people, it is not in a space of satisfaction. It is like I have to get this done because I have taken initiation and I have to chant 16 rounds. So that have to is coming from a space of duty, which is good, a space of obligation, a healthy fear, which is good because it is purifying. Anyway, we have so many obligations and duties in the material world. And now we have obligations and duties in our spiritual life that is purifying. But the fact remains that if it is an obligation, if it is a duty, then it is more like office. Just imagine office and home. Office is a place where you are like duty bound, where you have to get things done, where you don't like but you have to do it, and you don't feel safe there. You are like in a hurry. You may sometimes even cut corners, and you are time bound. Unfortunately, for many of us, our japa, our chanting is also like in an office state. We want to get it done. We want to so that we can do other things. So fine, let's not panic about it. If japa is in your in an office state, is there something at least in our spiritual practices which is in a home state, which is what we actually love? It could be worship of the deities. It could be reading verses from the Bhagavatam, where there is no struggle. I know some devotees for whom association of devotees is their home state. They can spend hours just listening and being with devotees, taking part in kirtans, just spending time. For some, it is a temple hall. They come to the temple, they just feel at home. So, so my point here is, if we want to connect to Krishna at an emotional level, if we want to offer our emotion, and if we want the our heart blossom and grow and expand in our devotional practices, then we need to discover those states of being or those activities where we are completely at home. So if you discover your home state in spiritual life and you spend time there, then you don't struggle. Then you are nourished. And that nourishment gives you the strength to face your struggles happily. Because struggle we cannot avoid. Material world has been designed in such an amazing way that there is always challenge. In fact, the reason why we go through so much suffering is because we expect this world to give us happiness. This world has not been designed to fulfill our desires. This world has been designed to give us challenges. And if we see this world for what it is, if we see Krishna's creation as, as a creation to give us challenges, and if we are clear about it, then we will be excited. We will see every situation. You see in your life, every day there is a challenge. Sometimes there is a financial challenge and you overcome that financial challenge. Then you have relationship challenge, you overcome the relationship challenge, and there is something with your wrong with your health. Every now and then there are challenges, and the biggest challenge is posed by other human beings, right? So it's always challenging, and to face these challenges is a struggle. And we come to spiritual life, these challenges don't disappear. So there's always going to be challenges, there's always going to be struggle while dealing with these challenges. And to ensure that our spiritual practices give us rich experiences of Krishna, as we are struggling with our vows and commitments to make progress in spiritual life, we also need to discover and spend some time in our home state, in those activities or in that state of being where we feel deep sense of connection. Now, let me clarify what exactly is a home state. What exactly is a spiritually safe space? So basically, when I say home state, I mean, see, if there are these 4 or 5 characteristics, like let's say there is an activity that you perform in bhakti, or there is a particular state where you are in. If that situation or that activity has these 4 or 5 characteristics, or most of these 4 or 5 characteristics, that means that is your home state. That is where you need to be more, so that your emotional relationship with Krishna grows. What are these characteristics? First, do you feel safe? Like, I'll give an example. I know somebody who loves deity worship. He can spend the whole day decorating the deities, dressing the deities, taking photographs of the deities. Deity worship is his homestay. And one day I asked him, why are you always in the deity room? So immediately he said, Prabhu, I just see the deities, I feel safe. So this is a key word. Safe. Safe means basically, you are at home. You feel you have reached home. When you are not at home, when you are running around, when you are going to office, you've seen people running around in the trains, the local trains of Mumbai, rushing from one place to another place. They are always looking here and there, and they are munching a sandwich as they are running. They are driving fast. There is so much of insecurity. There is fear. So we are talking about a state of existence which is opposite of fear. This is the first characteristic of a home state. Are you in a state of fear, or are you kind of safe? You are at home. You feel a sense of belonging, and this is a state where you are kind of stopped. There is nothing to, it's like, you go many places, finally you come home, and when you come home, not only you are safe, you stop at home. That's your final destination. So for many of our practices, many of the things we do are a means to achieve some other end. We are on a journey and we think the destination is something else. Like I may be chanting Hare Krishna thinking I want to go back to Godhead. So chanting is a means to go back to Godhead. But for some, chanting is not a means to go back to Godhead. Chanting is stop. That's the destination. That is where they have ended. There are advanced devotees who I know who chant. They're not in anxiety. They just chant because they feel safe when they are with the holy name. They are, for them, chanting is the end in itself. It's not a means to something else. So I'm now one way of explaining this is chanting should be your home state. I'm not talking from that space. I'm asking you, please ask yourself, is there some activity or is there some phenomenon in spiritual life? Rupa Goswami has given us 64 items of bhakti, and there are so much of variety in spiritual life. Ask yourself, is there something at all in your life, in your existence, where you experience safe, home, a sense of belonging? That is your homestay, where it's not a means to an end, it's an end in itself. You're not trying to fill some gap, you're not trying to remove some discrepancy in your life. You have reached the end point. This is it. Just like when you reach home, you're like, I've reached home after that long, tiring journey. Similarly, when you say read Bhagavatam, or when you hear Ramayana, or when you hear some classes, or when you worship the deities, or when you go to temple, is there this kind of an experience? Whatever gives you that experience is your home state. It is fulfilling the first of those 5 characteristics: safe or stop. It is an opposite of fear and insecurity. Now, uh, I know one young man who travels and who works. He leaves home in the morning at around 5:30, and he comes back to he stays at Ulhasnagar, very far off place in Mumbai, suburbs of Mumbai. He leaves at 5:30 for work, and he reaches home by around 9 o'clock in the night. Actually, he comes home back to Ulhasnagar, the station, at around 7:30, but he reaches home by 9:30. Basically, he's out of his house for 16 to 17 hours. And it's quite exhausted when he comes home. And then again, next day morning, he has to rise by 4 o'clock, take bath, rush back, travel. So he's got a very hectic schedule. So I was asking him one day, recently when I met him, that, you have such a terrible schedule. I mean, how do you live? How are you able to motivate yourself? So he said something interesting. He actually blushed first. And then he smiled and he said, Prabhuji, I know I'm recently engaged and to get married to a lady, and I really love this woman. She's such a nice person. So every evening around 7:30, I meet her in the park. And for 1.5 hours, I'm with her. So when I leave home at 5:30 and I'm really packed with my office work, with my marketing and with my meetings, there are times when I get choked up, when I'm like really miserable. But I know that at the end of it, I'm going to spend solitary moments with her. I'm going to spend some time with her. That anticipation, that actually that moment when I'm there with her, that is my home. That is my safe space. So now I'm asking you, in your life, is there some point where you feel fine? There's nothing more than this. This is it. This is a stop. This is where I am at home. So that is your home state. Nothing more to achieve. So that is the first characteristic. Hmm? And you can know you are not in a safe spot if you are having fear. So when he is with this fiancée, the girl is going to get married to, my friend, he says, when I'm in office, sometimes there is fear, there is anxiety, there is insecurity. But when I'm with her, there is no fear. So that's the first criteria. No fear, but safe. Hmm? That is a home state. The second criteria or the characteristic is there is deep satisfaction. Satisfaction or a sense of worth. Many of us are trapped by a need for approval from the world. Whatever we do, whatever we talk, most of the time we are looking for endorsement, certificate, approval, appreciation, acknowledgement from others. But you are in your home state when you are pursuing that activity, or when you are in that particular environment or in that space, you don't need anybody in the world to glorify you for that. You don't need the fame, name, respect, honor, position. Whether you are glorified or whether you are ignored, you are fine because you are in your home state. You are experiencing satisfaction. And you know you are not satisfied when you are seeking approval. Like I know somebody who said that he loves to serve. Service is his home state. Wherever he sees, he likes to serve. So he said, I feel very satisfied when I serve. And then he said an interesting point. He said, one day when I was serving this Food for Life, I was serving the needy children. Somebody took photographs and they put it on Facebook, and it went viral, and then many people shared their likes. He said, then later on, when I was serving, after a few days, I was more conscious of taking photographs and uploading those photographs, and I was looking at the likes. And then I realized somewhere that service had no longer become my home state, because I wanted something out of this service. This service was not giving me satisfaction per se. Now, in ISKCON, as a preacher, I have a mandate to tell you how when we render service, we feel satisfied. But that's the second step. Right now, I'm in the first step. Do you have some activity at all which satisfies you so much that your need for serotonin, which is one of the happiness chemicals, which makes you which gives you a sense of worth, you know, there's dopamine, endorphin, oxytocin, and serotonin. Serotonin is a sense of worth. It's a leadership chemical. Yes, I am worthy. I am doing this. So this sense of worth is achieved or met, and you don't need the world to glorify you for this. Is there any activity at all where you are satisfied by the intrinsic nature of that activity? It's not extrinsic. The reward is not dependent on the world giving you honor. Like for example, there's somebody who loves to memorize the verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now he memorizes the verses. I know this is one of my close friends, and he gives he gives classes, but he doesn't quote so many shlokas in the classes, and he gives okay kind of classes, but he knows so many verses from so many scriptures. But I hardly see him. He's not a very well-known preacher as such, but he knows a lot of verses and he's memorizing them all the time. But he memorizes these verses not so that he could quote them in classes. He's not looking for extrinsic rewards from those memorizing of verses. He's memorizing verses because that memorization of verses gives him the rewards in itself. So that satisfaction, where you don't need the world to honor you. So let's see, you are in your home state when you are in a particular state where if somebody ignores you or somebody praises you, same, it doesn't matter. So that is your home state, satisfaction. And you know you're not satisfied if you're looking for approval, if you're looking for likes and Facebook photographs, and if you're looking for endorsement, then you know you're not in your home state. Home state means where you are safe, which means you stop. That's the end in itself, and also you are satisfied. This is the second characteristic. Third is you are in your home state when you experience the birth of service. You want to you want to give, and you want to give because you are small in this beautiful gigantic universe, and you want to give. There is kindness, gratitude, appreciation, love, service is born out of this state. I know many times, even I've spoken about this, and I've heard many people say that don't worry about love and satisfaction. Just keep serving, and satisfaction and love will be born out of service. That's true. But we're not talking about love or satisfaction or happiness taking birth out of service. No, I'm right now talking about service taking birth out of a state of love, satisfaction, and happiness. Like I know somebody who uh, who loves to serve. For him, service is home state, and when he serves, he becomes so happy and satisfied that he wants to serve more. That's fine, but not everybody is like that. I know somebody else who just loves to worship the deities, and when he worships the deities, he's so satisfied that he wants to serve others. Because he's so satisfied, he wants to give what is experienced from the deities to others. He will give prasadam to some other devotee, or he will give some photograph to some devotee. Kindness and love is a natural uh, result, effect of you being in your home state. So when I'm saying service, or when I say, you are small, you are happy to give in a state of, sometimes we think when I'm satisfied, we mistake it to we mistake it to be pleasure or titillation of the senses. So that creates a sense of enjoyment. Now we are here right now not talking about enjoyment or control. Control and enjoyment is the antithesis of love. Control is opposite of love. When you're in love, when you love, you don't control, and when you control, there is no love. So we are talking about a space or a state where you want to serve, where you want to give. Kindness naturally flows. Gratitude naturally flows. Gratitude, appreciation, kindness, love. These are the effects of you being in your home state. So let me ask you, is there some state or is there some activity that you do after which or during which you feel a sense of contentment so much that naturally a service attitude is born out of it? You like to give. It's like a person who's satisfied after a meal and then he likes to serve. Okay, he likes to give charity. He's fresh, he's happy. So is there anything at all in your life which inspires you to give? That is your home state. So this is the third. So there are five or four or five. First is safe. You are in your home state when an activity gives you an experience of being safe, satisfied. Safe means basically you are at home. You feel a sense of belongingness. You are satisfied in that activity. You don't need anything else from it. And service is born out of it. And also, very important, you are spontaneous. It's a stage where you are not bound by time. I've seen my own spiritual master, sometimes, used to give classes and he used to give kirtans. There used to be no sense of time. He was in another world. You know, uh, when we are mostly conscious of time, like right now I'm conscious of time, I have to end the class on time. So when we are conscious of time, there is rigidity. And when we are spontaneous, there is softness of heart. You're not constricted by time in your life. There is no obligation. Many times we are obliged. Many times we perform rituals. We are in a hurry. We are in a speed. But we are in a home state when you're at home and you're not looking at the watch. You are just relaxed. There is. I remember when we went for yatras, we would go to Vrindavan sometimes and morning. the places we would visit and classes, and I would wait. And as soon as it would be 12:30, I remember the first yatra I went around 12:31. I thought this is lunchtime, so anytime the class would end and we would have lunch. But I realized it was one, the class went on, two, three, at 4:30 the class stopped, and I was hungry and I was hoping the class would end at 12:30. And at 4:30, then the managers of the yatra said, "Oh yes, now it's time for lunch. What do we do?" So they packed up, they removed all the chapatis and the sabji they had carried from the ashram in the morning. The sabji, the vegetables had got spoiled. Only chapatis was there and the rice was there. And then they had to go to the nearby houses in the villages of Vrindavan and get some pickles and some buttermilk, and then we had a prasadam. It was so spontaneous. Now, although I would have wished it was more better managerially organized, but another way to see this is the leader of the yatra, the devotees who were blissfully chanting, dancing, they were actually in their home state. For them, time didn't matter. When you're with the person you claim to love, time doesn't matter. So, so when there is spontaneity and time is in the background, that means you're in your home state where you're not worried about time. That's another characteristic of your home state. And the last is, which is the most important, it is a state of surrender, sharanagati, shelter, where you are not struggling, where you are like, surrender means basically, surrender is a very esoteric term. People get confused when they hear the word surrender. When we hear the word surrender, we think it is somebody demanding you to be a slave. Okay, surrender, I'm your boss, and you be my sycophant slave. You just do what I'm ordering you. No, surrender is not somebody, a master ordering a slave or a servant. Surrender means let go the struggle. The opposite of surrender is struggle, karshati. So when I'm not struggling, when I let go, when Draupadi didn't struggle, she just let go. Krishna, I am yours. So surrender is when I'm not when I'm not resisting, when I'm open to be influenced. When Draupadi raised her hands, she was in one sense taking a risk. She was giving her life to Krishna. So surrender means let go the struggle. Now we need to struggle, as I said in the beginning of today's class. Struggle is purifying. Anyway, we are struggling in our material life. So struggle is natural, and it is purifying us. But we also need to have some activities or some states of being where we don't struggle, where we simply release, where we let go, where we are willing to be influenced, where we allow, where we listen, where we are that surrender. Now, for example, as I'm speaking in this class, I'm giving an example now. If you are suspicious of what I'm speaking, and if you think, oh, what is he saying? Is this bona fide? Is this spiritual? So that means there is some struggle now. So because you're struggling right now, listening to this, you are not in your home state. But when you're hearing a spiritual master's class and you are allowing yourself to be influenced and you are not resisting it, that's it. That means you're in your home state. That is your safe space. That is where you need to be more so that you are nourished. Like I know my friend, dear friend Anand Vrindavan Prabhu. He's so senior. He's been an Hare Krishna devotee for more than 32 years. But he comes to temple and he hears Bhagavatam classes given by very new devotees. And sometimes I wonder what they can tell him. He is so advanced. But he's sitting right in the front and he's hearing very attentively, sometimes even a mediocre class. Externally, it may appear to be very mediocre. But he is blissful because he's not bothered about who is speaking. The Bhagavatam class is nourishing him. That's him hearing. So he's hearing without resisting. There is no suspicion in his heart. There is no confusion. He is simply allowing himself to be, is receiving. So that is surrender. So we'll elaborate this. We'll discuss more in greater detail the last two sessions. But please understand, we are going to stop here now with the understanding of what is a home state, what is a spiritual state where we actually, if we live in that state, our emotions for the Lord will grow. And this is a state where these 5 characteristics are there, where you experience your safety, you are at home, you also are deeply satisfied, you see service is born out of this state, and fourthly, there is spontaneity where time is conspicuous by its absence, and last but not the least, is it is a state of shelter or surrender. Just like a child is in the, a child is in the arms of his mother, the child is safe, the child is sheltered, the child is completely surrendered. Similarly, is there any space or any activity at all where we surrender? So these are the 5 characteristics of a home state. And in our next class, we are going to discover, or we are going to discuss how we can spend more time in this home state and experience. And when we spend more time in this state, you will see how you come closer to Krishna. So we will dive deeper into this subject matter. I want to stop here, and we'll summarize this again when we meet, and we will take this forward. Thank you very much for your sincere attention. हरे कृष्णा। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय। हरे कृष्ण।
RG Media YouTube channel. Like, share, subscribe.